everyone. It's so good to see you all coming off of the article that you all were featured in on Forbes. Excellent write-up and really captured the work that you all were doing, especially during a time like this. So I just want to thank you for having me, and for those that will be tuning in, I'm Dominique Griffin, and I am the woman behind the Black Women PhDs account. And tonight I have some fellow amazing Black doctors here. So I would like for you all to go around and just share your name, your specialty, where you're getting your degree, and then we can get started from there. All right, so I'll go according to my screen. We have Corey Grayson.
Hi, everybody. My name is Corey with a K, and I recently defended my dissertation from Cornell University in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and I just accepted a postdoc position at the University of Michigan in the Chemical Engineering Department. So I'm finished. You know, I got the mug and everything.
Perfect. All right, and then we have Regina.
Hi, my name is Regina Hill. I recently defended my dissertation in April from Azusa Pacific University. My degree is in higher education, and I currently serve as the Executive Director for Inclusion and Equity at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana.
Okay, we have Stefan.
Hi, I'm Stefan. I will actually be defending in a week and a half at Nova Southeastern University. And I currently serve as student counselor at Lynn University.
Perfect. We have Ashley next.
I am Ashley Cross. I defended in April from the university, or from Oral Roberts University. I've recently accepted a position as the executive director of Generation 2. It's an organization that focuses on social emotional learning in adolescents.
Okay, and we have Crystal.
Hi everyone, I am Crystal McLeod, recently defended in April from the University of Southern California, defending my dissertation, decreasing recidivism rates amongst first-time drug offenders, and I am an officer in the United States Air Force and a licensed clinical social worker.
Thank you. We have Josanne.
Hi everyone, my name is Josanne Kidjo. I defended in March of this year from Rutgers University from the School of Communication and Information Studies with a focus on media studies and women and gender studies. And I'm also assistant professor at William Patterson in the Women and Gender Studies Department.
We have Zealous.
Hey everybody, I'm Zelex Rivera. I defended in April, early April, from Walden University. My research was conducted with extended homeless stay of millennials in New York City shelter. Currently, I am a program director for a New York City shelter for families with children under 18.
Perfect. So we have Patrice.
Yes, so I'm Patrice. I am attending the Chicago School of Professional Psychology at the LA campus, and my program is Applied Clinical Psychology for the PsyD program.
Okay. All right. So how this will work tonight, I'll pose the question, and then from there, you can feel free to answer. I may focus the question to one person, but if you have something to add, you can definitely feel free to chime in. All right. But I know that you all have a wealth of experiences that you can speak to, especially in this state of transition, right? So now that you've earned the degree, really and truly, what's next? We have someone that's defending very soon, and you all will be going up on the job market. So really navigating this experience during this time, right? So we know it's already a challenge being a Black woman earning a doctoral degree, but now we see a different challenge, right? So we see COVID-19 trying to deal with a pandemic, and also Black bodies being killed by the state, right? Mass murders, pretty much. That's what we're seeing right now in the community. So you all are navigating this, still somehow staying positive. You're dressed up and ready tonight to have a discussion. So I do want to just hear your feedback, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you all. So I'll get started with the first question, okay? All right, so can you please discuss on the various types of degrees that you have, the doctoral degrees that you have. If there's anything that you want to add in terms of what your experience has been in your doctoral program, you can do that as well.
Yes, so I embarked on my doctoral journey, which I started in 2017, January 2017. I had just graduated with my master's in counseling psychology, and that's what led me on the doctoral journey, is that I wanted to become a licensed psychologist, as I had just completed my master's to be a licensed marriage and family therapist. I wanted to be a psychologist because I really wanted to get into the assessments and batteries of doing more psychological testing. I feel like there's not a lot of us that embark in the assessments in mental health, and so a lot of them are not skewed in the way that will help the Black community or other communities of color as they should be. So I embarked on that journey, and it was a tough one because I only got to take 2 weeks off between graduating and starting a program. So I was tired starting it, but I do feel like the program really helped me sharpen my clinician skills, and it's really helped me be able to help my community in ways that I feel like I wasn't able to grasp in my master's program.
Okay, all right. So you see like more exposure, right? And being able to really shift that narrative for your community. So that's excellent. Anyone else want to chime in on this? Talking about some of the road that you've taken during your doctoral program, or what led up to this point for you?
I'll speak just from a STEM perspective. I know a lot of people go straight into doctoral programs right after undergrad, but you definitely have some like me that are a little untraditional. So I took 2 years off and actually worked kind of retail at first, and then I finally worked at a biomedical device company, and then I applied to grad school, which was in 2014, and then I just defended in 2020. So it was a little bit of an untraditional trajectory. I was older than a lot of my classmates, and so it was a little bit different trying to kind of transition into that. But it also prepared me for a lot of the things that maybe my classmates weren't. As far as adulthood, I've already experienced that. I was, living on my own, or living with my aunt, but basically on my own. And so just having like different kind of skills that they maybe not have honed, but it definitely was a little bit of a different path, but it got me to where I needed to go.
Yes. So that path that you mentioned, so taking a break somewhere in there, did other folks take a break as well?
I'll speak to that, definitely. I started my program 5 years ago, so I was 32 when I started my program, working full-time, a wife and a mother, and my institution was in California and I live in Indiana. And so I had to spend 2 weeks at a time, every January and July on campus in California, away from my family, and still trying to maintain my job while I was away as an administrator at a higher education institution. So my route was definitely untraditional, but my program was set up for full-time workers or administrators within higher education.
Okay, perfect. So there was some flexibility there, and it seems like support from the program as well. And that is something that is definitely important in terms of being able to work full time and then also tend to the expectations within the doctoral program. So thank you for that. So the next question I'll pose, what does it mean to be a first generation college student? So I know you all have talked about your experiences just a bit, but I know that there's some first generation college students in here. Who's first generation by a show of hands? Okay, so we have a few. And do you want to speak to that experience, Ashley?
Yeah, sure. Well, both of my parents actually, their highest level of education is a GED. And so it was, I'm the oldest as well. So my brother hadn't been off to school or anything. So just going in for undergrad, just getting a bachelor's was a big deal. And then going back and doing my master's was an even bigger deal. And then when I went in, it was like, well, I think I want to keep going and then, get the doctorate. I think for the longest, my parents didn't even understand maybe what that meant. When you hear doctor in front of somebody's name, you automatically think medical. So my mom, just explaining to her, like, no, Mom, I'm not. She's like, well, actually, that's a big shift. Like, you keep changing. You went from psychology, then you did business. Now you're moving into what is this doctorate, you know? So even just explaining the whole process to them. My parents are very supportive. My mother is very supportive, but she didn't understand what it meant, like how much of a sacrifice it was going to be. She just looked at it as me going back to school, which has always been a sacrifice and it's always been a lot of work, but this was different. And so just explaining all of that to her was a lot, you know, and having to, you know, we already live far away, like where my mom's in Colorado. During my doctoral studies, I actually relocated from Oklahoma to New York. So all of that just happening, my mom the entire time did not really understand because her highest level of education is a GED. So being a first gen definitely has its challenges because you spend time trying to almost educate your parents about the educational experience that you're going through because they've never done it. But I'm very blessed to have a mom that's super supportive and she was willing to ask questions and not, you know, be upset that I couldn't talk to her because I was working on my dissertation. But even the dissertation within itself, like she was like, so what are you writing? What kind of paper? And I'm like, please don't call it a paper. Like it's much more than a paper. So just coaching her and kind of letting her know, and my grandparents are not educated. No, you know, so all of that to them was just like, what is happening? So, but it was, I mean, I love the fact that I have the support though.
Yes. So, and that is definitely something that is pretty much consistent, right, across the journey. So what I've noticed in running the Black Women PhDs platform is that there's a lot of Black women that are on this journey and have the support from their families. But then once you get to the doctoral level, this understanding of having to write a book, right, we could call it what it is. And there are no definite endpoint, no definite finish lines or end points in sight, right? You're pretty much on this journey by yourself and having to navigate those conversations. I know that was something that I experienced as well. It was like my family was supportive, but then once I got to the point of entering the doctoral program, it was like, okay, so when are you going to be done? When are you going to be done, right? And then it looks like you're lying when it's like, I really don't know. I'm at the mercy of my committee.
Mom asked me so many times, so when are you defending your dissertation? I was like, I don't know, Mom, it's still being edited. But you just went through it. Didn't you just get it edited last week? They sent it back. I have more corrections. Like, so talking that whole thing, she was trying to buy a plane ticket because she wanted to come out for the defense. And then she's like, well, so all of that was just, it was very interesting. And I felt like I kept saying the same thing to people over and over. It's, you know, it's in this process. And they're like, I thought she's got it back. So yeah, that's a struggle.
Mm-hmm. And I see Regina wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, so I feel a different level of responsibility at the doctoral level. So for my bachelor's degree, it was all about just being the first person in my family to graduate. Like that was my main goal. At this level, I feel a higher responsibility. You know, people walk around with shirts that say, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I kind of feel that way, that I am uplifting not only my ancestors, but my village and my nieces and my nephews and my daughter, just giving them something to look up to. So I really see this as I am blazing a trail, I'm breaking generational curses. And so the responsibility is a lot more heavy on me with this one. Maya Angelou has a quote that says, and I'm paraphrasing, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. So every time I went out to California to sit in the classroom, or every time I have opportunities to talk about my experience, I feel that way. Like I'm here by myself, but I'm representing so many more people because I'm now at this level. So with this degree, it has a lot more weight of responsibility for me.
Right. And not only your personal family, but even folks out in the community as well. So definitely.
And I'm from the hood. Like I grew up in the hood, and so my hood is rooting for me. So I really feel like I'm doing this for my community.
Yes, I agree. And I know we have a couple of Bronx girls on here, myself included, and then someone else. So I definitely understand that in terms of doing it for your community as well. Corey, you wanted to add?
Yeah, just from a different perspective, because my parents were both in the military, 20 years of peace of service in the U.S. Army. And So for us, it was either you join the Army or you go to school. Those were your options. It wasn't, or you get a job. But mostly our parents pushed going to college because they didn't necessarily have that opportunity to go and finish. And so for me, my immediate family, my brother, my mother, father, I was the first one to get my degree. I rub it in my brother's face because he's older than me. So he went to school for 5 years, I went to 4, and I graduated a week before him. So I like to, put that up there. But now being a PhD, I'm literally the only one in my family that has a PhD and has a master's. So it's definitely a different kind of responsibility, even explaining that to them. Even my aunt who went to West Point and, she has a college degree, she's always like, when are you gonna get a real job? How do you think I survived? This is a job. It may not be as much as you make, but it's still a job. I get paid. And so having to explain that to her, or having my mom actually come for my thesis proposal to see what I was actually researching and talking about, and for her to finally be like, okay, now I kind of understand a little bit more. Although I'm falling asleep, I still understand a little bit more about what you're talking about right now. Or my dad, like, I've never thought a scientist would look like you, but now I do. So just having those type of like milestones to talk to my parents and being able to talk about my work with them and break it down even to my grandparents, especially because cancer runs in my family. So now I can have different kinds of conversations and lead them to like the research that's happening in the field now and kind of connecting and bridging that gap. So I think it's definitely been worthwhile. I have 2 little sisters. I'm hoping that they'll go and hopefully be PhDs if they want. One's in college right now. She's doing her major, I think, in chemical and biological engineering or chemistry. And then the other one's just a super smart 10-year-old girl. So I feel like they're going to be smarter than me and do even more amazing things. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, and that is always the challenge to put forth to the next generation. Yes, you see us, folks are like, oh my gosh, I want to be like you. No, we want you all to be better than us, do more than what we're doing. We're doing this now, we need for you to be up here with it, right? So definitely, I agree with that challenge for sure. So as trailblazers in your family, right, many of you being the first or the first to reach this level and earning the PhD, how have you navigated imposter syndrome?
I can jump in. So I think a big part of the imposter syndrome feeling is the feeling of just feeling isolated when you're in a space that no one looks like you. And sometimes you feel like, well, you're expected to be the voice of the people. So I felt that a lot, particularly in a media studies a media studies degree. I'm surrounded by discussions about the media. So whenever someone of color, a person of color says something, it turns to, okay, let's hear what Josanne has to say on behalf of the people, right? So I think that's the isolation feeling that I had. But the big thing that helped me with imposter syndrome is surrounding myself with other people who looked like me. So I was part of a Black student, graduate student group. I later became president of the group. So we had weekly meetings, and it was a part of a process of just talking through our imposter syndrome. That way we didn't feel isolated. We didn't feel like there was something wrong with me, that I was doing something wrong, but it was literally understanding that this is the systemic institutional types of racism that we all are facing. And it's not something that you're lacking. It's just the reality of how society is built. And that helps me greatly, right? Just being surrounded by those people. And I think also for me was just talking to older scholars and having them discuss their past and their experiences, right? So I had a mentor outside of my department. She was in the Africana department, and she became my mentor. So I would go and cry on her couch in her office, talk to her, and she would just like really engage and talk to me about the realities of being a Black woman in the academy, where you won't have those discussions traditionally in a classroom, particularly if you did it in a PWI like I did. So that really helped me.
Okay, so making those connections outside of your department. Zealous, I saw you make a face there. Do you want to chime in?
I just wanted to like almost piggyback, but just explain, I guess, where I'm at with it now. So I recently defended in April, and similar to everybody else's story, I'm the first like PhD in my family, but not necessarily the first one with a degree, like as far as undergrad or whatever. And similar to Ashley, a lot of times they were like, you finished your paper yet? And I'm like, if it was a paper, I would have been finished. Now I'm at the point because of COVID and because we haven't been able either to celebrate it and life just kind of has kept going. Like, so, we kind of defended. Then it was like, all right, tomorrow you got to go back to work because the world closed anyway, that it hasn't hit 100%. And then I'm getting two sides of the spectrum. Like, on one side, I need to reevaluate my circle, which is very hard now because I didn't think that was something I was going to need to do. And I'm sure you understand, like, come from the Bronx, or from the Bronx, or just from anywhere, that if you reevaluate your circle, then it's like, are you better than them? No, you just kind of really need to reevaluate your connections and who better understands you. So similar to what was said, I kind of feel constantly alone because one, there was no celebration. Two, we can't go out to even let it process. There's no stop button. We kind of been in the house. And then three, is kind of like nobody around me understands what I'm talking about. The feeling that it was to hear them say, at the end of the defense, congratulations, Dr. Rivera. Like, that was a overwhelming, unexplainable feeling to have. And then everybody was like, so what you eating for lunch? Like, as if it was nothing, And so I'm at the point now where it's, again, you're reevaluating your friends on one spectrum, and then on the other spectrum, you're feeling alone, right? So now, like, you're completely by yourself. And then just to bring me home is that now I feel like, so you have a PhD, because mine is in social policy analyst and plan, which makes me it should make me a better administrator on the non-for-profit side, right? However, ever since I finished my dissertation, and now with the shift of the climate within Black America and things of that nature, I'm at a roadblock or whatever, that either I need to stay a non-for-profit and go this way, or possibly consider politics, because, I'm not 100% a protester, but I want to be at the table to try to help. So, like, that's where I'm at. So now I'm alone, I ain't celebrate, and I'm kind of trying to figure things out. And I'm, just sitting, waiting for the world to open, so that maybe when the world opens, I can stop. And then I can start to process, what's next for me. Like, I knew what it was 5 years ago when I started my program, because I was like, oh, great, not-for-profit, I'm gonna move on, get a PhD. But now that it's real and it actually happened, because, you're in a program for 5 years, you don't think it's ever ending, especially when you have a committee that's like, do it again. Okay, cool. But now that it's over, it's like feelings of being alone, feelings of not being surrounded by a good sister circle anymore. And it's not to say they weren't good. They might just not be good for, the PhD, if that makes sense.
Right. Being able to connect and understand your experience and where you are. Folks think they have it figured out. Then once you get the PhD, you realize there are so many opportunities. There's a plethora of things for you to get your hands in, and, trying to navigate that. It's really like a person leaving undergrad or high school. Like, you ask them, what do you want to do? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I don't know. So I completely understand. Crystal, did you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I did. So this word imposter syndrome, right? When I used to hear this word, I used to be like, what the heck is that? Like, what do you mean by that? What does that even mean? I don't even understand what that is. Until 2017, until recently, I probably in the last 6 months or so, I think I really said, okay, well, maybe that's what I was experiencing in 2017. And in 2017, during a deployment that I had, my career changed forever. And I think that's when my imposter syndrome kicked in, right? And so I was like, what's next? Like, I had this plan, I had this path. You couldn't tell me that this wasn't going to be it. You couldn't tell me all of these things. And then that changed. My plans changed. And then I decided, okay, so what's next? If that didn't happen to me, I probably wouldn't be standing here or sitting in this conference with you guys talking about my success and my road to this. So during that time frame, and even while I was in my program, I was a mess. I was stressed. I had anxiety. Sometimes I would feel really low, really depressed because I was like, wow, my career was supposed to go this way, but this happened, but you got to keep pushing. Then they sent me to South Dakota and I was like, what? And then it was like, what am I going to do here? It's freezing. And it was just a mess that turned out to be everything I needed it to be. And so while my journey wasn't super easy, and my hat goes off to these ladies with families, husbands, children. I don't know. Ladies, I don't know. Okay, I just don't think that I would have been able to do that. So my journey, it hasn't been so difficult, but I think internally I had so much internal struggles with myself during this journey, and I still do, because I still have a lot of decisions to make about whether I'm going to stay, or whether I'm going to go, or what is my next career path and what I need to be doing right now. So this journey definitely hasn't been easy, but it's been all right. It turned out to be all right. It really did.
Yes. And you described it perfectly in terms of it's a journey, right? So this is where you are right now, but you're also giving yourself that freedom to know that it will change and it can change, right? We see that at so many different levels, but that openness to do so. And both of you started to talk about this, but maybe some of the obstacles that you all might have faced during your journey, can someone speak to that? Stefan, we haven't heard from you yet.
Sure. I think I've been in the PhD program probably longer than anyone else. This is the 10th year in the program. And I think all of it, you don't go into a PhD program to underachieve. Like, we are all those people. And so I never thought that that would be my journey. Like, I was supposed to be done, like snap my fingers and like this would have been done, 5 years ago. But life said, you're going to have several seats and go on this journey with me. I had several health complications. The beginning of my program, I was a caretaker for my grandmother. And anyone we talked about having families. I don't have children. I don't know how I would have done that. But taking care of someone who's actively dying changes you. And so trying to be a therapist, trying to be a PhD student, trying to make sense of life really threw me there for a while. And so not only were all of these things that I was juggling kind of an obstacle for me, but also mental health, like that's real. And so being able to say, you know what, let me take care of myself. Let me take the time that I need and jump back in when I'm ready, I think was really important, not only to me finishing, but also to surviving.
Yeah. And not just in the PhD, but just in general. So that is a lot. And you spoke to the mental health piece, but Crystal also mentioned the anxiety and how it plays itself out in some of the different roles that you have or navigate in this path. We mentioned tackling or managing motherhood. And Ashley, I believe you have children. Can you speak to that experience?
Yeah, so this is really just even piggyback off of what even Crystal was saying. When I started my program, I was 27, and I was living in a girls' home that I had started, and that's really what pushed me to want to do the Doctoral of the Educational Leadership Program, because they were kids in foster care, and education was a real struggle for them. And I seen that there were so many disparities even within the public school system for foster kids. So I went in with huge aspirations, like I'm going to go in, I'm going to knock this out in 4 to 5 years, then I'm going to start my own school for kids that are in foster care. And all of the obstacles that I faced, they were good obstacles, but I feel like I went through a minor identity crisis with each of them. So I got engaged, I got married in 2016, relocated. I married a pastor, and so I quickly had to move into the first lady pastor role. And, you know, he's a big mouth and he's so proud of me. So he's always talking about my wife is getting her doctorate. And I'm sitting there like, and I don't know what I'm gonna do after this. Like because everything was just always changing. Then we get married, and 6 months after we get married, I get pregnant. And so then I'm like, okay, I don't have the energy like I used to. And I think that that was the first time that I realized like Ashley has limits. Like I cannot do everything. That was the first time that I ever felt like, okay, I can't push myself any more than what I already have. So I went through like a minor like stench of, it felt like kind of depression, because I was just like, I don't know why am I even doing my doctorate? Like now I'm a mom. That's really the biggest thing. I'm a mom and I'm a wife. And that's how I felt for a minute, even though I'm sitting here and I'm breastfeeding and I'm working on my dissertation. And so in my mind, I'm like, I don't even know where this dissertation is taking me, because this baby, I'm having a hard time even staying up. And so we went through that, and then I started working again, and I was working a job that was not necessarily something that I felt like was relevant to my career path. And so even within that, I was like, I've never worked a job that I got up and didn't like. So now I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm working a job that I don't like, and my husband's still alongside. My wife is getting her doctorate. And I'm like, okay, once again, that means nothing to me right now. And then recently, I'm 7 months pregnant now. And so I remember me and my husband, we were in New York, and I took a pregnancy test on our little vacation, and I was like, I'm pregnant. He's like, stop playing, and he was super excited. And I remember I sat on the bed for like 30 minutes and all I thought about was my dissertation. Like that's the first 30 minutes of me finding out that I was pregnant. That's what I thought about for the first 30 minutes. And I text my chair and I said, I'm pregnant. Please tell me I can still defend. Like and she was like, it can happen. It can, but all of those things kind of pose as an obstacle, even though they were all huge milestones and they were good. Every single time it's like I met a new phase of Ashley that I had to deal with. And it was, I felt like I was going through like this internal chaotic, phase of learning who it was that I am. And then even after graduating, to Dr. Rivera's point, we didn't have no celebration. Like we went out and bought some steak and came back home because it was COVID. And then after that, I started having a problem because I'm like, okay, so do I just go in and start introducing myself as Dr. Cross and change start demanding people call me this now and change my signature? And I went a month without my signature being changed until a Black woman called me and was like, you need to change your signature right now.
Immediately.
And I was like, but that was that imposter syndrome. Like, it hit me again. So.
Yes. And it's interesting, especially in having this conversation with you all. You all opted to be called by your first names when you are doctor. So that vacation quickly turned from vacation to babycation with the added surprise. So thank you. And you all are mentioning this, so I guess this is a conversation that we can have. Like some of the obstacles, you've had more recent obstacles, right? So dealing with COVID-19, but also now what's happening with Black America, right? How are those challenges, or how are these outside external things impacting you all in this place right now where you all are in this state?
Yeah, I can talk to that because I am a consultant. I do diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work. And so it has been my life, my career, my research. And now as an entrepreneur, this past 3 weeks, like business is booming for me. And I have been trying to maintain my own work and then help my clients out with, everybody's putting out a diversity statement right now. So helping clients write diversity statements and commitments. So it's been pretty busy for me. And I've been doing a lot of panel talks about systemic racism and just calling out whiteness and white supremacy, helping white people understand this. So I'm doing a lot of conversations with white people because now they have this new awareness or awakening and want to know more. So I'm being pulled in several different directions now, and I'm trying to play catch up. So I'm still trying to process it myself. The first week was not good for me. I had to write a piece just to get it out because I was like, I'm not okay. And I do this work and people are pulling on me and I don't see any hope right now. The first week I saw no hope. It's like, I don't even want to do this work because other people don't want to do the work. The people that need to do the work to dismantle the systems don't even want to do the work. So it was hard for me. And I finally came out of that rut and now I'm hitting the ground running and helping other people's. I'm trying to be an access point for people who are willing and wanting to learn.
Right. And that's important. Go ahead, Crystal.
So I'll just say, to speak to the first part of the COVID part, being in the Midwest, we didn't have the impact that maybe New York had or DC had. So I can't even imagine what those individuals were going through as they kind of had to just lock down immediately, right? But the issues that we've had on this side is being in the military, we go extreme, right? It is, you can't go anywhere, you can go home, you can go to work, and that's it. So, and then I'm sitting here like, I need to go to my graduation, and they're telling us that we can't go to DC to do our residency and our final defense, and we like, what? We want to go, like we are petitioning USC, like, no, we want to do this, we want to go. And then, you know, we get to the defense, it's fine, and like that lady said, we get to the graduation day, and it was this different thing, this pre-recorded vibe, and it was like, what? And it's like, I'm sitting here and I told them, I think when we were on another call, I didn't put on my cap and gown till like a month. It just stood on the door for like a month because I just didn't feel anything. And sometimes I don't know that I still feel anything because we just didn't have a lot of opportunity to do anything. And then as far as kind of moving into the state of the world, I'll be honest, it's overwhelming. I live in a city where less than 1% people look like me. I'm in an organization where I am the only of my level and grade on the installation. And so I had to do 4 panels this week as well. And to hear some of the things I heard this week, I'm like, okay, social worker, get it together. You got to teach, you got to educate. I will be honest with you, I'm having a rough time. I am simply having a rough time with the things that are happening around me. I don't know why I can't believe it, but I can, but I don't want to at the same time. And I can't begin, when we look at people who are in positions of power and leadership and management, and they don't have the basic skills, they don't have awareness, to me, that's privilege. When you don't even know that you need to know, it's privilege. Right? And so I will be honest with you, I am struggling in the current climate that I am in. I really am.
And what are you all doing to help you with that, right? So some folks mention, and this is my school counseling background, and I know we have a couple of folks in here in the counseling field, but how are you managing, right? So saying that you're not okay, but what spaces are you entering in to kind of help you get through everything, processing graduation and all of the above?
For me, so the therapist goes to the therapist, right? So yes, as a therapist, I see a therapist as well, just to kind of help me process my own stuff, right? And my own issues. And so that's a part of what I do as well. But I do have a network of honestly strong Black women that I talk to every single day, all day long, right? And now, you know, added to my group of amazing women is Stefan, because we talk every day as well now. So it is, I need that because I'm very isolated in my city. So for me, I'll be honest, therapy and my network has really been the most helpful thing for me going forward.
Yes, and Corey, go ahead.
I know for me, when I did my defense, I actually did feel more of a celebration because my mother came and actually surprised me. So while I was doing my defense, my mom was sitting on the couch along with my roommate, and afterwards, you know, popped a bottle. So there was like a slight celebration. But I will say, since everything that's happened, at least I know within the STEM community, we have really stepped up and really tried to amplify Black voices, either on each other's platforms or even on other platforms that claim to be diverse. that really aren't. So then they realize and recognize what we were going through as Black women and men in STEM, and were able to kind of showcase us a little bit more. But even then, I have networks such as like STEM Noir, where we can come and talk together, and we have Wine Down, kind of like a Wine Wednesday or a Sip and Share Thursday. And so I'm able to talk to fellow women and men of color, especially within STEM, about how we feel about the current climate and how we're dealing with it, whether it's like dating during COVID or now currently the killings that have happened. So it's been a very supportive time, but at the same time, I have to kind of step away. Like I can't watch the videos. I have to take care of my mental health first before I can actually be of service or advocate for anybody else. So I know with me, it's more about posting my experiences or posting what I'm going through. And it's even crazy, like the post that I made on LinkedIn, dedicating my PhD to my ancestors, my forefathers, foremothers, my parents, grandparents, and then to the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, got so much backlash. Well, I would say more congrats than backlash, but it surprised me to see how many people were so disturbed by the fact that I wanted to honor people with my PhD. And so these like racial microaggressions, like, well, you should go back to these countries and you're, inciting racism and creating this divide and you're making a political message, is just asinine. And it's crazy that people can draw those parallels during this time, but it shows me how far we still have to go. Regardless if you have this kind of performative activism where you want to all of a sudden figure out, what racism is and you want to call it out, we still have so much work to do as far as like what people think of Black people in general. And so it's been a mix of like, yay, I'm here, I did it. And then it's been like, oh, y'all just need to shut up and just say congrats and keep it moving. Good Lord. So, and then I finally got to wear my gown and take pictures and was able to celebrate that in a certain kind of way. So just finding little moments where I can celebrate has kind of kept me going and kept my spirits high. On top of finally turning in my dissertation, submitting it to ProQuest, and I'm like, all right, I'm done now. So those are just some little things that have kept my spirits high.
Okay, so taking care of that mental health piece for sure, and then entering into some of the STEM groups that you have as well. I can definitely agree. I saw those posts and I'm like, but I'm not in STEM, but I love what you all are doing. And we have a group as well where we write together during the week, and then on the weekend, on Saturdays, every other Saturday, we'll get together for happy hour, and we'll have a happy hour. And I know that there's some folks that are in pretty much some of the same groups, but definitely a group of other Black women PhDs as well, that's creating that space for each other. So it's interesting, like during this time, we're finding pockets to really still socialize and get the support that we need, even though we're in isolation or operating by ourselves. And I think that that is something that is pretty consistent regardless of if we were out in the fields, in our schools, in the workspace, because we need to create these avenues for ourselves as Black women earning doctorates, right? So we have this now and we're being very strategic, but what did this look like before? And what are some of the parts that we can hold on to? So I do hope that this is something that we can hold on to in terms of taking care of our mental health, but also creating and sustaining some of the groups that we've created or been a part of once the world opens back up, right? Because we have to be intentional with receiving that support. And sometimes the support from our families is not necessarily the support that we need when navigating the doctoral program. So thank you for that. In terms of some of the microaggressions, so some of you mentioned this already, having dealt with microaggressions. Are there any that you want to speak to? I see now there's a page on Twitter, Black in the Ivory, that talks about the experience and the trauma, let's call it what it is, right? The trauma of earning a doctoral degree and what the experience has been like as faculty, but also as students. So I'm faculty at Fresno State, and it is a minority servant institution, but for mostly Hispanic students and also Asian American students as well. We have a lot of Southeast Asian students here, but still there are very few Black faculty and very few Black students. So I remember going into my dean's office and saying, What are we doing to intentionally recruit Black students, and still having this conversation at a university that is not set up for Black students initially, right? So that's something that I'm still processing and thinking about it as my role as a faculty member. What am I going to do to contribute to this or really help uplift some of the voices? But what are some of those microaggressions that you would have experienced or that you want to speak to? I don't want you all to relive the trauma, but just what can we do moving forward?
I'll speak on it. Even for my defense. So my defense was barriers to mental health treatment for African American men. And since it was COVID and we did have to hold it through Zoom, my mother invited everybody. So I think I had like 25 people from like across the country, everywhere, joining in on this Zoom, which made it even more impactful because of the topic and what was going on. I think like I defended a week before Mr. Floyd, was murdered. So it was just, there was a lot going on. But the little microaggressions that I got in my defense was that I'm a firecracker, and I already know what that means. Because my chair, I didn't have classes with her, but my reader I did. And so there was comments about like, oh, Patrice was the little firecracker. And when, things, when conversations would go somewhere, Patrice be the first one to talk about it. And it was just a pleasure to hear her spunk or her brightness or her fireness, discussing those things. And I already know what that means because I already know who I am. When you say something wrong and it's off key, I'm gonna say something about it. So I already knew what he was talking about. But in that moment, I was just feeling very, happy that I was defending. There was like some type of spiritual connection that was going on during my defense where I just became extremely emotional. And I think that was because I was speaking on behalf of Black men that haven't had their voice heard in a while when it came to mental health. And then to have my whole entire defense filled with Black people hearing what I have to say, like I'm supporting them, it was impactful. And so I wasn't really paying attention, but then when I got the feedback from everybody telling me about them firecracker comments, I was like, here we go again. Why can't it just be, this is just who I am? Why do we have to always pretty much say like I was the loud Black girl in the class? That's how it pretty much was. And so even in the moments that we're trying to celebrate ourselves, there's always one little comment that just makes it go left. And so for myself, even outside of college, I went to predominantly white Christian schools all the way up until high school. So I was like, they were trying to make me the token Black kid. That just never worked because that's just who I am. And so even in this climate of supporting the community and everything that's going on, and then the Black men that are suffering and dealing with PTSD and all of that, it's just like I still have to show up at my job as a director of a clinic and support everybody without offending everybody about how I feel. And then on top of that, hold my organization to the accountability of what are you guys going to do? And they're looking at me like, well, we can acknowledge that you guys are going through things, but other than that, we don't want to step on any toes. And that's where I go back to saying, well, how about you just check on our well-being? Ask if we need a day off. Ask, are we able to show up for our clients? Ask how our family is doing. Everybody wants to tiptoe around things. You don't want to show clips because it may offend here and there. It's like, no matter what, you guys want us to show up. You guys want us to be, you say you want us to be Black, but when we try to tell you how to support our Blackness, you pedal back. So, like everybody has said, especially Crystal, it has been a tough time. I am a therapist. Primarily, my practice is Black men. So holding space for them while going through all this has been very challenging. And so the aggressions and all that going on, it's still very present, even though people have taken a break a little bit because they don't want to be judged. It's still very prominent, and it's just disappointing, and it's upsetting.
So you said that, and I know that you wanted a very relaxed space, Crystal.
You know what? I'm good. Let's just go with it, ladies. You know,
but when she said it's upsetting, the first thing I wanted to do is put a hashtag and say, it's upsetting me and my homegirls. So we need to figure this part out of how we going to move forward, right? We have to be professionals, but we also need that space to kind of calm down and unwind and try to get through, because the microaggressions, yes, folks may be taking a break And it also may appear that they're taking a break because we're not engaging with them in person. So you just get the emails and not have to deal with it, face to face. So that might change things, right?
Yes.
But I do see folks are still protesting, still out there on the front lines, and still making sure that folks know that Black lives do matter and will continue to matter and have mattered all along. So I'm glad that you all are speaking to that. But I just had to throw that in there to just lighten the mood. But that is such a heavy question. Joanne, did you want to add to it?
I think with microaggressions, I wanted to go a little different, just kind of thinking about the experiences I had on campus of being the only grad student to ask for ID every single time I went to the library, even though I literally lived there, till I was like, no more. Why are you asking me for ID and you didn't ask anyone else? Just having those experiences, being the lecturer in front of the class and calling for IT support, and the IT support not acknowledging that you're there and asking for the lecturer, even though you're sitting at the lecturer's table. So moments like that, I don't call it microaggressions because it doesn't feel micro, right? And I hate the term because it doesn't, right? Because you relive it, you remember it. It has a long history, right? So I think for me, I had a lot of key moments where aggression happened, spaces happened, and also being an advocate for the younger students. So I worked with the Black Student Association at my university, and time again, it was moments of professors making use of those words. And as Patrice said, words have power, right? And those words are firecracker, and those coded words, those dog whistle words that they will use subtly to not say what they want to say. And then also being around a lot of feminists, right, could be some of the most toxic spaces in the world, right? So everyone wants to talk about sexism and the man and patriarchy, but not discuss how they are part of this whole process of white supremacy. And when I do bring it up, the problem. I'm constantly trying to break apart the unity that's here when the unity is not even there. So those moments are very toxic, and you remember them time and time again. You also remember that no space is safe, right? It's something that's reality, and those idea that, oh, this is a safe space. Not if you exist in a body that we exist in. A lot of times those spaces are not safe. So for me, the microaggressions, I barely call them that because they don't feel like that. But I had a lot of experiences of people expecting something different from me, or expecting me to be somebody different because they didn't expect in my body it would be me, right? And I'm used to that, right? So once I'm on a college campus, it's usually when I walk into a space, they don't think I'm a professor. I know that's something that's going to be a part of my experience forever, unfortunately. And then you connect it back to the world, right? So you have students in those spaces who came from families who have discussed white supremacy. It's part of who they are. So their reaction to you is also a part of what they grew up with, right? And it's traumatic also when you get it from students of color too, because they have been indoctrinated into the space as well. So when you're trying to break, and I teach on race and gender in class, so it's always a violent space sometimes. When I mention white supremacy, I literally have to be like, I know I'm about to get it back, right? So the energy is usually confrontational, angry, so it's that moments where you have to breathe deeply and just remember that you're speaking from a space of knowledge and information, and not a space of just feelings, which is usually what you're told. Oh, this is just emotion. No, I'm speaking out of spaces of understanding. So that's my experiences with microaggression.
I think microaggression, just like for the term, I know it seems bigger than, it's on a macro scale, right? But when we're talking about micro, it's like between people. That's why they use the micro kind of synonym in front. Even though it doesn't feel micro, it's definitely, I think that's just more of like the wording for sure.
And I'm glad that you talked about the things that you talk about in academia, because one of the issues I have with the field of social work, and I have all 3 of my degrees in the field of social work, and I have never taken a class, right, during my time discussing these things. And that's one of the things that we're talking about within the Department of Social Work and the NASW. Why doesn't our curriculum discuss the importance of privilege, race, these differences? Because I have not had one class. I had one class in undergrad on cultural diversity, and that was it. And I don't remember anything. Okay. That's what I'm saying. So here we are. What is going to change in academia now that we are seeing the revolution is being televised? Okay. So what is going to change in academia? And as a young lady who is coming into academia for the first time, fresh, right? This is going to be new territory for me. You know, what is that going to look like, and how are we going to be teaching these things? I really struggle in my field with 70% of my social work peers being Caucasian. 10% of African Americans are licensed social workers. Less than 10%, is actually 7.6%, but I'm just saying less than 10% to give a little room, okay? So I struggle with that because right now, licensed clinicians are needed in our community, right? But within the organization and within my field, we have prejudices within the field. And so that's what I love that you said that you were able to teach these courses in academia, because we have to be able to talk about this stuff in the class setting. Because we're out here teaching and doing therapy with people. We have people's lives in our hands, and we can't even recognize basic things like privilege. I have a problem with that. And I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but thank you for bringing that up, because I'm struggling with that even in my own field of social work and the small percentage of us that is present in the field of social work.
And this is the space for you to go up on the soapbox, so please. So if anyone else needs to take a step and step up onto this soapbox, please do so. But you all are speaking to two critical things in terms of entering into academia, but also ageism plays a role. And then the experience that we have as Black women, we can also experience some of those microaggressions from Black men as well, or some of the trauma that Black women experience could be from our folks that look just like us, right? So we hear the term skin folk are not always kinfolk, and that could apply across the board experiences from folks in the African diaspora, or, you know, in the same community that just may not speak to or have the same experience. So there is diversity across the experiences as well. Something that I do in my classes, I do make it a point to mention, you know, you may not know how old I am. I may appear to be young, but you don't quite know how old I am, right? And when it comes to some of the evaluations, I'll say, as a faculty of color, and especially as a woman, a Black woman, a lot of the comments may come in and say like, oh, I'm intimidating, or, you know. So I mentioned that in class, so that way I don't see that on my evaluations, and just making sure that I still create an inviting environment for the students as well, but also making them aware of this is something that you might experience, because I do have students of color that I'm speaking with or facilitating the classes with. This is something that they might experience as well, so I invite them into that discussion. So there's different ways for us to assert that in all of these different spaces. Corey, I know on your page you often post, this is what a scientist looks like. So in the STEM field, I'm sure that you have experienced a wealth of microaggressions. Can you speak to some of those, please?
Oh, sure. One, I think, is I get the words intimidating a lot, just because, again, I was older in my class, and so I was very sure of myself and confident within myself and what I would say and what I would feel and how I would speak. And so people were like, oh, well, she's kind of intimidating. And I'm like, I just become immune to that. And I just feel like that's kind of your problem, not mine. I'm not saying anything outside of what my peer would say. Although I may have a little bit more like fervor behind it, it still is no different from how Timmy would say it. So if you're intimidated by that, like, I can maybe apologize if I say something that I know is wrong or has maybe offended you, but other than that, I'm not really going to change all the time my tone just to walk around your fragility. And so even sometimes when I am talking with like white women, for example, they kind of have a tendency to like get emotional and cry. So I kind of have to talk to them in a different way than I would like a white male peer. And so just kind of navigating that space and how I kind of have to alter myself in order just to be seen as just a peer that's not trying to attack them. So changing my language, changing how I confront confrontation. I've been called confrontational when I'm like, no, just because I don't run from it doesn't make me confrontational. I mean, I was like, I went to HBCU. You talk about each other, you joke on each other, you better come back with it. Then I got line sisters that talk to you all kind of crazy. So all of this isn't new to me, but when you're in these like predominantly white spaces, then you have to kind of like, unfortunately, alter yourself just a little bit. But now I'm at the point where I'm like, y'all just gonna take what I give you. And if you have a problem with about it, we can talk about it. But in general, this is who I am and you just need to accept it. Being from HBCU, I've been, invalidated because of where I got my bachelor's degree from. So that's like a microaggression we have definitely faced, especially other HBCU women. Like, does your degree even count because you went to such and such school, you went to this school? And it's like, yes, I'm here with you. Why wouldn't it count? I didn't lie. I can do what you do, maybe even better. And then another one definitely is hair. Hair is definitely a microaggression we encounter on a daily basis. And it's crazy because there's so many YouTube tutorials and so many things you can go look up if you're really curious about Black hair. And so a lot of times, oh, well, Corey, well, do you have a ponytail today? Or, we don't know how you're going to come into lab, and you will continue not knowing. Okay, maybe one day I'll have a bun, maybe one day I'll have a weave down to my butt. Like, just deal with it. And so just different things like that, or racially insensitive jokes. And when you have to tell people, you're like, hey, don't say that, or don't call her that, or don't use the N-word, you're not allowed. It's just offensive, or the sexist things that I have heard. But over time, I think it comes with dealing and addressing those microaggressions. So initially I would want to just cuss somebody out and then like just yell and like storm off. And that's what I used to do in the beginning. But now I've just kind of collected myself and been able to process things better and been able to be even more professional with it, and kind of like in a nice, nasty way. So if you have a microaggression you want to say, like, let's dissect that. What would make you say that? Do you think that was smart to say? So asking questions on why they think that was appropriate. And then going further steps like, I don't think that was okay. If this happens again, then I will talk to my advisor or your supervisor, or that was very unprofessional. And I think when you start addressing them that way, it kind of turns where people know not to say certain things to you. And so, but in the beginning, you're kind of met with this internal battle of what do I do and what do I say? This person just attacked me, but I can't, be this angry Black woman. What am I going to do? And it's this battle, and it's like really wears on your mental health. But after a while, I'm just like, I don't have time for you today. So don't say that again. And let's just get back to work. And so I think it becomes, like I said, a constant battle that you have to deal with. But eventually we have to take the time out of our day. I got to educate you now. I got to read you real quick. Okay, and now let's get back to work. So being that within STEM, it's still there. It's still quite palatable, but I think we're getting better at finding our voices and addressing it and helping each other address it when we see it as well.
Right. And knowing their language, right? So sometimes, and these are academics that we're dealing with, they need to see articles or read about it. So if I know the person, I'm like, oh, I may address it or say something here and there, but I may also refer them to an article, so that way I don't have to, and they know where I'm coming from in terms of don't do this again, right? So just finding out that way that you can respond to them. But some of the things that you spoke to was this idea of having to code switch or change your language and how you're speaking in a different space than when you're with your friends, and then what that means, right? So some of the social impacts of earning this degree, but also entering into these different spaces, right? Or having a seat at the different tables that we're at. So what has that experience been like for you all?
I don't have the ability to code switch. I just never was good at it. I don't have any plans to perfect it. I just don't. So I would love to hear from you ladies on that, because I don't have the ability to code switch. I think that, that in itself is just stressful enough. You know what I mean? Having to feel like we have to be certain places and certain things. And I'll say when I was younger, I'm confident that I did do that as I was coming up as a young officer in my career. But at this point, ladies, I just don't have that ability to code switch. I just don't. I don't know. So maybe you guys can give me some tips. on that area.
It's not necessarily something that we want to do.
but I know it's something that has to happen, right? And probably a part of my inability to code switch is because I'm in an organization where there's a hierarchy. It's a natural hierarchy, right? And I'm a part of that food chain, the top of that food chain, right? But I still have people who are over me and who are, you know, and I just don't really have that ability. But that's something for me to think about, because I have to think about that as I try to move into entrepreneurship, as I move into academia and these different things. I have to be able to adjust accordingly, right? And so I'm really interested in hearing from you ladies, because my code switching game is
I could speak a little bit to it. So I don't really have to code switch either, because I'm in shelter. So, you know, I speak to them kind of regular. You know, the Bronx tends to come out periodically. It doesn't really matter. However, I started to think about that if I decided to go into politics, because I'm pretty sure when you go into politics, I'm gonna have to finagle some words and change some things, and my face is gonna have to get worked on. I'm gonna need a really good publicist. It's gonna be so many like levels of this to make sure that simple things don't happen to me that I might see some of the other minority women that are in Congress and Senate that they're going through now, right? So I kind of think of that, and that's part of my decision-making process. Like, if I really want to go that route, or should I go more of the Angela Rye route where I can say whatever I want on CNN, but not have to be elected in? Like, so I'm trying to think of like what's better and what I can curtail. But I do remember, just to speak to, I guess, a little bit about change. And I remember having to change my nails at one point, you know, at some points of employment. I do have a tongue ring that most of y'all probably don't see, but I had to chant like, oh, make sure your tongue ring isn't seen. All these kind of things. And I was like, at the time, I was like, no, this is me. And I got all the degrees to back it up. And then at some point I changed them. And at some point I changed them back, because I started to become more comfortable and confident in who I was. And I think the further I went in my education, the stronger I became to stand by and understand who I was, because the tongue ring does not mean whatever you want it to mean. It's something that I did and I just didn't want to let go of. And it's just that simple. But yeah, I just start to think of, I don't really have to code switch, but if I decide, and even if I take another route, if I go further up into working maybe for the city as it relates to homelessness in New York City, if I go try to get a city job that's more directly with them, with the mayor's office, I'm pretty sure that I might have to change what I'm saying, but I probably won't. So that's the part that I have to begin to, because advocacy, I'm always defined similar to Patrice as passionate. Like, why are you so passionate? Like, I'm not passionate. I said what I said. I just want you to understand what I'm saying. I'm not, don't do that whole, oh, she's so passionate. Like, no, I just was very direct, and I don't want you to get confused and try to label me as something that makes you feel more comfortable to gather what I'm saying.
Dr. X is preaching right now. Continue.
I think for me, I don't really, so in STEM, we use a lot of jargon. And of course, in all of your professions, we use a lot of jargon. So even when I talk to my parents about my work, I will use more lay terms so that way they can understand what I'm talking about. So instead of saying apoptosis, I'm like, all right, we're just trying to get the cell to die, you know, so that way they can like understand. So for me, it's not really like code switching, because I'm still like, even if I say a slang or a colloquialism, like, you understand what I said and you know what I'm talking about. Like, I don't have to sit here and change it completely to make you feel comfortable, but let me use some terms that you will understand today. And so like, that's more of like what you kind of have to instill. And it's also about people watching, like how different people will respond to things. So as I said, when I approach sometimes a white female, I might have to be a little bit more gentler. So, hey, how's your day today? You know, I like your shirt. That's all right, cool. So why did you do this? Why did you leave that over there? You know, and so sometimes my approach is just different based off of maybe how I might even approach another Black female. Like, hey girl, so da 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 da, or Jacob, why'd you do that? There's just different approaches based on people, and that's just how we move and alter in life anyway. The way I talk to my grandmother or my mother, the same way I talk to my brother. So I'm not saying you definitely have to like strip everything that you know and how you talk, because that's just not being authentic to yourself. But there's definitely sometimes we want to get a message across, and that's what media does so well. They'll switch it to where they're trying to target a certain audience, and they'll use certain keywords that will get their attention. So I think it's about understanding who your audience is and how you need to deliver that message to have that greater impact. And once you can figure that out, then you'll be more effective at being able to kind of maintain different dispositions with different people. Like even high schoolers, if I'm talking to a high schooler, I know I have to have a little bit more of a mothering type of voice in order for them to understand, or even more of a disciplinarian, because I'm gonna let you know we're not peers, you're not my friend, we ain't on that level. So it just like kind of just depends on your audience. And even when you're talking to superiors, I know we're talking to them, they like evidence, they're evidence-based in fact, and you have to really like have bullet points on why you think this is this and X and Y and Z. So please don't ever change yourself. Be your fabulous, beautiful Black girl magic self. But sometimes you'll definitely just have to alter it a little bit when you are talking to specific groups of people.
Right.
I want to piggyback on what Corey said. I think working at a predominantly white institution, code switching for me is more so showing up for people specifically where they are, because I know that I need to definitely approach my superiors or my peers in a certain way. But when I'm working with students, I'm intentional about my code switching because I need you to know that when you come into my office, this is not a performative space. Like you can breathe here. You don't have to do that thing that you do everywhere else. And so you can almost, you can see that where like, oh, this is a safe space. I don't have to perform for you. And so just me showing up authentically allows them to do the same.
I agree. One thing I think very similar to your experience, particularly being in the academy, is being very intentional in bringing in Black scholars whenever I did anything, because a lot of times that was my code switching, right? So everyone, they would be talking about issues of race and we'll be using white scholars to do so. So like my work was very intentional of Black scholars, particularly Black women scholars, using them as my voice, right? So in my dissertation, I was very intentional of using mostly Black scholars, right? So for me, that was a part of code switching, being able to speak their language, but using Black scholars as the way to do that lens, who have already done that work, and we can use them, and their work is credible and it's sustaining and critical, right? But there's a tendency, particularly in the academy, that that canon of work who's particularly mostly old white men, and we have to always refer to them and reference them and use them when their work may not really fit in. So for me, code switching was intentionally using that. And then also I'm Caribbean. So for me, being an international student, being Caribbean, there was always this expectation for me also to represent the African-American community, as I said, when I'm not African-American, right? So there was always this kind of constant denial of having to change who I am to fit into a mold, and I refuse to do so, right? But at the same time, still knowing that when I'm in a space with advisors or professors, I'm able to speak their language. I'm able to quote theory that they are comfortable and they understand where I'm coming from, but still using as much Black scholars as I can potentially do. I remember very early, maybe my first semester, the end of semester paper, we were all doing that presentation about what you're going to write. And I was talking about Black bodies because I do Black women scholarship, particularly on Black bodies. And I was thinking about, at that time, the ways in which women were creating changes to particularly their posterior, right? And we were talking about that. And it was very interesting to be in an all white space talking about Black women's bodies. And then having people ask, does that fit the assignment, right? When other people were doing game studies about games. And I'm like, does that fit the, Dungeons and Dragons, does that fit, right? So it's this idea that Black culture is not critical enough, and it's not important enough to be seen as something academic. So that was my code switching, refusing to do that. But I agree, there are moments when you have to, right, to get into the room and get into the door. But when you pull up your seat at that table, you could start letting them know, this is who I am, and I'm speaking your language. You have to see me for who I am as well, right?
I see some snaps there. So definitely being intentional with the folks that you are uplifting and using in your work and providing that outlet or that support for them, making sure that their voices are being pushed forward. And I think that that is something that is extremely important in terms of making sure that we cite each other. Cite Assista is definitely a space that captures that. I think that they're doing some amazing work as well, but just in our own fields, like making sure that we're bringing light to that and highlighting some of the work of other Black women and Black people in general, right? Another thing that you mentioned, so you have a Caribbean background, and my work is centered in Barbados, actually, and something that I've noticed, like, I do identify as African American, but my family is from the Caribbean and also from the South. So I grew up in a household with both cultures, I should say. But I realized that there's a way that we still police Black bodies within the Black culture and across the diaspora. So in the Caribbean in particular, there's a way that they police Black bodies, and it doesn't look or feel like racism because it's Black people that are in charge, right? So it's a little different when the folks look like you. But I remember interacting with some of the students, and they would say, like, can I speak to you in Bajan? And I'm just like, yes, I understand what you're saying when you use the Bajan dialect, right? But I also know what you're saying when you speak the quote unquote Queen's English, which is how they refer to it as. So thinking of ways that we also may police Black bodies when we're not even thinking about it or realizing it, and seeing how ingrained it is in the culture. That's something for us to think about as well as we navigate this space and enter into the field. Crystal, you wanted to add? I see a head nod there. And Regina, feel free to chime in as well.
Now, I think Josanne made a really good point about bringing in voices. I think for me, my whole dissertation was a code switch because I had to use the language of the scholars. And it wasn't until chapter 5 for me, my discussion section, where I felt like I could then use my voice. But then it was my academic voice. And it wasn't until I got to my final reflection where I really used my broken vernacular in my dissertation. I was adamant about putting that in there. So I think for me now that I'm out of that academic mode and I'm looking to do more writing, I'm trying to hone in my own voice as a writer and think about, I think it was Dr. X that said, you know, does she want to be like an Angela Rye or does she want to have to clean it up? Like, I'm trying to figure out my voice and hone in my voice as a writer because I want to be true to the Black experience and Black women experiences, and I want to be able to speak our language and connect to us on that level. So I'm not too much worried about if I can reach white people and they don't understand what I'm saying. I don't care because I want to do my work for Black women and the Black experience. So for me right now, the code switch, I'm breaking out of the mode of the academic mode, but trying to hone in my voice as a writer.
Okay, perfect. And also branching out into the different communities. So expanding your work and being able to connect with the different communities as well, regardless of the group that you're working with. So I do hear you on that. I want to switch tones or switch directions for a second and kind of focus on that financial area, right? So navigating this space, we know that there is a wealth gap, right? We know that Black women tend to make less money than our white counterparts do in the same exact position. So what are some things that you all have done to navigate this space when pursuing the doctoral degree? So I know some of you have received funding. What are some ways or maybe suggestions that you have to future students or even current doctoral students?
I'll speak from a different perspective, and this is probably more when I talk about the funding, especially for, you know, people who want to do it from the military side of the house, right? And I preach about this quite a bit. There are a lot of benefits that we have for our education, and even though I went to a private university, the majority of the expenses was covered through that. So from that side of the house, the military is an option for people if they are looking to have education paid for, and things of that nature. Also, if you are a veteran or if you are a spouse of a veteran, you can be a part of the Yellow Ribbon program. And a lot of universities also take, most universities now have Yellow Ribbon options for veterans and family members as well. So that's the kind of financial side of the house that I know how to speak on, though I know these ladies probably had a different, vibe. I was definitely fortunate in my financial piece to be able to pay for the education and get a lot of those things covered.
Okay. Excellent. Anyone else receive any funding or want to speak to that?
Mostly within the STEM field, your education, if you want to get a PhD, is usually paid for either by the grad school, or you'll get fellowships, or you'll be grad assistantships. So either way, PI has to find a way for you to be in the lab and do experiments. So I had an NSF fellowship, and I also had another fellowship, which totaled my 6 years within my PhD. So the only thing that my PI necessarily had to pay for was like research supplies, and that was from his grants. And so usually you get diversity supplements, or you put a student on, or you get a grant, you put a student on that, and that supports that student or that postdoc. So a lot of times with funding, we don't necessarily have that as a worry. And plus a lot of STEM fellowships are some of the highest paid fellowships that you have out there, even postdocs. And so that's why I really try to push, especially women in STEM. I'm like, y'all, it's free. You can even stop at a master's if you don't want to go any further, but it's free. So that's just one thing within STEM. There's definitely a lot of financial support and that you have and that you can get and acquire and maintain moving forward. Even as soon as you become a professor, you also get in like extra supplement packages from the university, like millions of dollars to start your lab. So it's never really, money isn't necessarily a thing we all have to worry about. But you definitely see it with other PhD programs. Like if you are in the social sciences, like we didn't necessarily understand why we needed a grad student union, because we're like, we get money, we get paid. But when you maybe are social sciences and you're in New York and you only get $20,000 to do your PhD, that's not as fair and as equitable. So again, it just kind of depends on where you are within your degree. But I know for STEM, you're going to get paid some way, somehow.
Very true. I did my doctorate at Penn State, and I'm in counselor education. I have a dual title in counselor education and comparative and international education. And mine was fully funded by the university. So I received that internal funding, and it was an assistantship, the Button Waller assistantship, and it covered all 4 years for me to get the degree. So it worked out in my favor, but I do know that that is not always the case for some students. Definitely having to take out loans. I took out loans for my master's when I was at Howard, and now I'm just like, hello, monthly payments, right? Can't defer any longer. But just some of the ways that I've navigated that. I received funding in undergrad, but then I said, I'm at a PWI, so I'll go there. Spelman was my dream school, and I didn't go there because I wasn't going to get that funding. So I went to the PWI initially for undergrad, and then I said, okay, since I received that funding, I don't mind putting the money out for my master's degree and still getting the HBCU experience that I wanted. And then for the doctorate, once that was fully funded, I said, okay, you know, it worked itself out. There's some balance there, right? So just thinking about it, we've navigated this. Corey, you haven't paid for anything, have you?
Undergrad neither. I had a full ride scholarship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's different opportunities for students. Josanne, you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of put it out there, you know, between fellowships or scholarships, but there's also definitely TA-ships or GA-ships, particularly for in the non-STEM, a lot of times your department may require you to actually teach. And a lot of people look for TA positions or even part-time lecturer positions, which is what got me through, particularly coming from the Caribbean, and I had to multiply everything by $6. So making sure that I had a teaching position every semester was the ways in which I paid the other things that were not being taken care of, right? But I think one of the things that I will say about getting a teaching position is make sure that you're not limiting yourself to your in department, because I've seen that a lot. Like I've had friends who are saying, oh, I'm not getting any teaching positions this semester because they're not offering it to me, they're offering it to their favorites. But you can go outside, right? Because most of our work is interdisciplinary. In some way you can stretch yourself and realize maybe it's a course that I took in undergrad, I have something that I can teach in the business school, I could teach over here. You can stretch yourself a little bit, right? So all my teaching positions, I taught a couple of times in my department, but I mostly taught in Africana and a women and gender studies department, right? Even though that's not where my degree was coming from. And that actually paid off in the end. So when I was looking for a job position, my teaching experience was not just only in media studies, right? And I can say, hey, I taught in gender studies, I taught in Africana. So it actually helped me market myself. And I got a position in a women and gender studies department because of it, right? So there's other funding ways, particularly fellowships, but it's going to require you to do it yourself and write that essay and pursue it and search for it and do all that work. Or you can do the labor of teaching, which is what a lot of people tend to do because it gives you the less amount of stress of writing another paper, of looking for money, being denied, you know, that type of stuff is a little harsher than taking the teaching position. Especially if you know you want to go into academy, you should probably just take the teaching position and get that experience as well.
I wanted to speak from the PsyD perspective. I think I'm the only one that's a PsyD in the group. I don't know if anybody else is, but I had a small scholarship. I think it was like 10 grand, but the rest of it came from FAFSA and Grad Plus loans. So I didn't get any funding. And so one of the things that we hear in the mental health field is that if you want to get a doctorate, but you don't want to go through the PhD realm, go through the PsyD because it doesn't have as much work as a PhD, but just know that you're going to have to come out of pocket for a lot of that degree. And so before you decide that you want to get the PsyD, make sure that you have a way of knowing how you're going to pay for it. I see a lot of us in different Facebook groups that are going down this journey. They get into the first semester and they're like, hey guys, you guys have any ideas of how I can pay for the rest of school? That's not the way to go about it. If you know that you're going to tap out of FAFSA because you've been using it for your undergrad and your master's or whatever, and you know that you have some adverse credit where the Grad Plus may not be the fit for you, make sure before you start the journey, you know how you're going to pay for it. And so I knew going into this degree that I was going to be broker than ever. But I also know that in my field, I will be able to recoup that, and it's a really good investment.
So for me, similar to Patrice, I actually paid for the entire thing out of pocket. So I was poor. Like I was poor. It wasn't like half poor. I was like poor. Me and my clients could have just been together at that point for the last 5 years. So yeah, I paid every quarter out of pocket. So then I would try, and this might not sound good, but then I would try to find ways to get my books since I was paying tuition out of pocket. So a lot of times Google lets you get some of them chapters. So I would try to do it that route as far as books. You know, sometimes I'm a preacher's kid and a preacher's grandkid. So a lot of times like the church will give you something like a book scholarship that you might use here and there, or like, you know, that $1,000 scholarship that they found from somebody, like all those kind of things. And they were very helpful, but overall it was about $4,000 a quarter. So I had to keep trying to hustle. I mean, and then being that I'm salary and I don't really make, you know, more, I don't get overtime. So I used to tell my staff, man, if I got overtime, I would just stay here the whole day. And they just was like, I don't know for what. I said, because I got to pay for tuition. And to top all of that off, I'm working for an agency that does not have tuition reimbursement. So I really invested the whole shebang. And the reason I did that wasn't because I really had the money to do it, but it was more so I had gone to, since high school, I've been in private schools. And I went to HBCU as well. Then I did 2 master's programs in between there. So those were all like FAFSA. And because I went to HBCU from New York City, I think they felt like my mother had an abundance of money compared to, you know, the state regulations out there. So a lot of that came out of her pocket and then came out of FAFSA. And I just didn't want that, because when I finished this, I wanted to prepare for a family and kids and buying a bigger house and things like that. And I knew that having $300,000 in loans was not going to necessarily be a good idea if I was trying to, you know, do those things, especially as far as buying a house out here in New York City that start off low 500s and go up. So I had to be mindful of that. And I knew that, you know, I started my program at 30, so that was already in my brain. So I ended up paying straight out of pocket. So now that it's over and all this extra money in some place, I kind of look at myself like something's happening, because now I have money to buy stuff. And I'm like, wait, something's due, and it's not. So it's kind of weird now. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
So being able to prepare for the next steps, that kind of helped you decide, okay, it's all right for me to put this money out right now. So some kind of way, still negotiating or balancing along the way. Okay. So I guess the question that I have, and Ashley, you spoke to this, kind of navigating the family role as well. What are some things that you have taken into consideration when dealing with the financial aspect of earning a degree?
Yeah, so my husband and I both actually started our doctoral journeys at the same time. And so it was right before we decided to get married. And so we were paying for a wedding, and then also thinking about how we were going to both pay for our studies. Luckily for me, I was a student athlete undergrad. So I was on a Fulbright scholarship, and then I was a graduate assistant through my master's program. So I felt a little bit more comfortable taking out loans. I still did find several different scholarships that were able to help me with my, you know, during my doctoral studies, but I was a lot more comfortable taking out loans. And kind of the same situation with my husband. He had a lot of undergrad taken care of, a lot of his masters were taken care of. So we both felt like we were okay with doing that. And then once we started, you know, once we had Harper, you know, we haven't had to start paying back that stuff yet. So now I'm waiting, you know, the clock is kind of ticking. I have a few more months until that kind of hits us, but we've had to take all of our other debts and just prioritize paying those off. So that because we know these, you know, student loan payments are about to start hitting us. So let's try to pay off our car notes. Let's do all of these things as quickly as we can so that we can kind of, you know, put some of that debt aside and then, you know, confront the debt that's about to start hitting us pretty soon. But even once we started the journey, once my husband and I both got to the point of writing our dissertation, he had to actually pause. And we both had a conversation about who was going to pause their journey because we were just overstretched. We both could not write our dissertation at the same time. And so because I was a little bit further along and I was moving a little bit further along, he made that sacrifice to pause so that I can go ahead and finish my study. So now he's about to be on, you know, he's on the chopping block now, and he has to go ahead and get his dissertation done since I'm done, and then we'll both have both of those payments. So we're just confronting as much debt as we can now because the next year we're going to be paying, you know, for our student loans. But it's all for our doctoral studies because undergrad and everything else has been dealt with.
And I guess this kind of leads into the next question. Is there any advice that you would give to someone navigating having a family and also being in a doctoral program?
Yeah, prioritize and over communicate. There have been, and I'm sure Dr. Hill can attest to this. I've had a lot of hard conversations going into the doctoral program. I made a list of everybody that I need to have a conversation with. Like, these are people I need to talk with and let them know that our dynamics, our relationship is going to feel like it's changing, but it's not. It's just me pulling back 100% so that I can focus on my studies. And so me and my husband have had to have those conversations. I've had to have the conversations with my mom and some of my closest friends. And so they knew, they understood. So absolutely over communicating, and making sacrifices. There were several times that I had to send my husband somewhere without me and just tell him, you have to go, you can represent the family, I have to stay back. And I used to, when my daughter, when she was an infant and slept a lot, I would get up and go to Starbucks 6 a.m. and work from 6 to about 10. And then I had to have my pumping schedule and everything on so I can go. I mean, it was a lot, but I lived by a planner. Like, I need to do this at 6 o'clock. I need to be doing this by 8 o'clock. When she takes a nap, I'm going to work on, cleaning up my reference section. So I had to really learn my body. I had to learn what I could take emotionally, and then over communicate that to everybody that was going to be impacted by my decisions.
Yeah, Ashley's correct. It's a lot of communication. And I feel like now that I'm done, I have to go back and rekindle relationships with my friends, with my family. Even though I was present at events, family events, I really wasn't there. And so now I'm experiencing life differently. I'm happy it's summer. Summer is my favorite season. And I'm like, oh, the sun is shining and the sky is like really blue. I have like this new sense on life right now. But over communicating with everyone, every semester I had to have a conversation with my husband to tell him, okay, this is what is expected of me this semester. And I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. You need to cook a little bit more. And then sometimes it was about my mental health. I cannot work in a chaotic situation. And if my house isn't clean, I feel like I have to clean my house and then I can start doing work. And by the time I finish cleaning my house, I'm tired to do the work. So it was even, okay, I need to hire someone to come in and clean for me so that I can have, when I come home from work, I can sit down and not worry about folding clothes or cleaning the kitchen or cooking. I can actually get down to my study. So every semester, it was a re-up of a conversation of, this is what I'm going to need this semester. These are the places I have to go, the conferences I have to attend because of school. And then over communicating with my daughter. She was young at the time when I started my program, and I had to be gone for 2 weeks at a time for 2 months out of the year. And so a lot of times it was mailing her stuff or going on Amazon while I was sitting in class and sending her things in the mail, writing her notes while I was away, just to keep that connection with her. So it was a lot of sacrifice. But in the end, I would say it was worth it because my daughter now looks at me and she thinks mommy's this strong woman and I want to be just like my mom and I want to travel the world like mommy and I want to speak at conferences like mommy. So right now on the other side, like it was worth it. But going through it, honey, I was like, is this even worth it? Like, I just want to hang this up. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we here?
But even to Dr. Hill's point, I was kind of, in a weird way, grateful for the pandemic because it forced me to slow down. Like, I don't know that I would have defended on April 1st and then been out, like trying to figure something out by April 2nd. So it was like April 1st, I defended, and then my daughter walks in and I'm like, you want to watch a movie? Like, let's sit down, let's cuddle, let's watch a movie, let's go to the beach. And so for like a whole month, almost 2 months, we were kind of just stuck in the house together, and we were going places with our little mask on real quick, come back home and having picnics in the house. So it was a time to reconnect, but even to the over communicating, I had to always check in with my husband to make sure that he wasn't feeling neglected either. So I was constantly like, babe, I feel really anxious right now. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I need from you. But then I had to check in with him and be like, are you good that I haven't cooked in a week? Like, we've been eating takeout. Are you fine? You know? So his mom helped us out a lot with that. So I'm like, let's go to your mama's house for dinner tonight. So it was a lot of communicating.
And Stefan, you also spoke about your experiences in caring for a family member that was about to pass away. Can you speak to that? Any advice that you would give someone that may be in a similar position or having to care for others during that time?
I think I would agree about over communicating because that's something I didn't do. Like, we have kind of that mythology about being a strong Black woman. And so I feel like the expectation was I needed to present well. I needed to work. I needed to care for people. I needed to show up for everyone who needed me, even if that was to my detriment. And so I would say, like, it's not a cute thing that we tell people, like, take care of yourself, check in. I think a huge support for me was my friends, my peers, just the people who were in my program who I could lean on, who I could look to, who would check in with me, who would say, you're not good. Or because we're all in my program, we were therapists, who would say, you know what, you're doing the most right now. You may actually need to go to therapy. And having strong people in your life who are willing to check you and make sure that you take care of yourself when you need to. So I'd say some semblance of balance, even if that doesn't seem tenable at the time. Self-care is really important.
Right. And I think it pivots or changes the way that we experience or understand balance, because when you think about it, it's not that we're even on all sides, is that there's some more focused here, and then at a different point in time there may be some energy centered in another area in our lives, right? So you're focusing on your degree and also caring for yourself, but also having to care for someone else. So then the other aspects or the other roles that you may play, that may be, less of your attention is going to that area. So I think it really challenges that strong Black woman trope, right? And also really saying, hey, I am balancing it all. My energy is here, but it's also in this place as well, and being okay with that. So I'm glad that you spoke, or many of you have talked about that experience. So it kind of brings me to the next question in terms of what now, right? So you have your degrees, you're about to defend soon, so you're almost done, and we're just going to claim and put it in the atmosphere that you are doctor. But we look forward to celebrating you. Please let us know when it happens, and pictures and everything. And some of you need to be featured on the page if you haven't been already. So I'm just going to throw that in there. Send your bio and photo. But what now, right? So what are the next steps for you? How are you processing where you are? Are you taking a break this summer and then starting a new role, or what?
I can start. For me, my day-to-day continues to go. Like I said, I'm active duty, so nothing necessarily changes within the day-to-day. I do have some very important decisions to make in the next year. I've had some opportunities come my way, so I'll be making some very important decisions in the next year regarding my career, in the direction of my career. So for me now, it's time to see kind of what path am I going to take in the next year, and then we'll see from there. But as far as day to day, just like they said, you get up, okay, April 16th, boom, back at work Monday seeing patients, like, yes. So it wasn't a whole lot of a change in my normal routine. I do have some time to figure out my next steps, and I know some people are figuring it out in the midst of defending. So I was fortunate enough to have enough time. I have enough time to figure out my next steps.
So similar to Crystal, I'm kind of in that limbo, and my graduation is so far away from the day I defended, which made it feel more delayed. So my virtual graduation is in July, and then the face-to-face one is in February of 2021, which is, again, so I guess I'm really not, I'm joking. I'm about to say I'm really not real till February, but the virtual one happens in July. So I'm at that point where I'm trying to figure it out. But right now, since, New York City just went into phase 1, so we're still kind of closed. The day-to-day never really changed for me, right? I took off of my defense, and the next day I was at work trying to tell the clients they need to go do something and be better. So I'm actually, again, like I said earlier, I'm waiting for almost like New York City to open so that I can retreat and go the opposite direction, to actually sit down and process. However, one thing that I have been doing is being more mindful to stop. So I didn't get to stop with the pandemic because I'm essential, right? So I had to keep going to work and every day going to work, I had the anxiety of having to be stuck here because, I work in human services. So that always was like an up and down kind of feeling. But I've been very intentional now of of just not doing anything, which took a while. And I guess they call it dissertation withdrawal, that you're literally sitting there and you're like, I have a TV, look at this. And it works. And I've been paying the cable all this time. Like those kind of small things that we probably were taking for granted. It's like, wow. And look at all these shows. And it's almost to the point where I'm finding shows and I'm telling people about shows. And they're like, that was in 2016. I'm like, well, it was great. So just enjoy it. So those kind of moments are happening to me, but I'm trying to be very mindful. Like, for example, today I've been rocking since 8 a.m. This is like my 4th recording. And then tomorrow I'm completely disconnecting, but I have to be mindful to disconnect because I'm so used to picking back up the phone, checking on somebody else, going through my Instagram, my Facebook, whatever it is. But tomorrow I'm going to be very mindful and be more aware to, take care of myself.
Patrice?
Yes. So I don't know what's next for me. I guess like my day-to-day, I don't know how to sit down. I'm just gonna be honest. I tell everybody to sit down. I don't know how, but honestly, like I haven't had a break really since high school. Like I maybe taken like a semester off in between like, the higher educations, but I've been a student my entire adult life. And so I'm really looking forward to finding out who Patrice is without always having to say I'm a student. It's going to suck not having that excuse as to why I can't go out. I don't have homework and I can't say that anymore. So I'm going to have to find be intentional. I just don't want to go, or maybe I just need to go. I have to figure that out. But I am looking forward to finding myself as Patrice, not Patrice the student or the therapist. I am, going for licensure. So unfortunately, I still have to get 1,500 more hours. Which means I still have to be tied to like an agency or organization, to get those hours. But I really want to expand my private practice. I'm licensed in multiple states. And so having all these different things that I can do, but I only could put a toe in each one of them because I'm so busy everywhere. I would just like to evolve as, the Black woman that I want to be, and not always have to be tied to something because I'm forced to do so, or I need to do it to make it. I feel like I'm at a place now I don't have to think like that anymore, and that's scary in itself. So I'm gonna learn how to take a break. California is on phase 2, but we wilding out here, so I'm gonna stay in the house. And I have school until the 21st of this month, so I still have homework, and I'm gonna act like I'm still in school so I can pass this semester.
Excellent. I wish you the best with your exam, hours and everything for licensure. Josanne?
Well, I'm still in Trinidad. I don't know when I would be able to return to the U.S. because we are not opening our borders anytime soon. I can see that. But, it seems like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck here, but I haven't been home for longer than a month and a half for over 12 years. So being home with my family is amazing. So that's given me a chance to breathe. But as far as the next steps, continuing to teach, but also working on that book that you're required to do. So I've already started. I'm under dissertation fatigue, relaxation. My brain is completely on pause. But I'm little by little, I'm starting my little sketch notes that I usually use to start a paper. So I've been doing that a little bit, and I know it's the book. And then also, a lot of my research have centered on the United States, but I am very, very passionate about doing some more work on colorism, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, because that is, racism stemmed through colorism is our biggest foe. And particularly right now in the Black Lives Matter happening in the US, we are hearing and we're having a lot of problems here in Trinidad based on that. So I'm thinking about working on a documentary. So that's kind of been something I'm working on with my sister-in-law, who's also a documentary editor. So we've been talking about that. So for me, it's more projects oriented. I've been taking this time to breathe, to catch myself, as Patrice rightfully said, learn who Josanne is. Haven't really found out who she is in a long time. My best friend is just waiting for things to open up so we can actually hang out, because that doesn't happen without me saying, well, I gotta go, because, so all those things, I'm just trying to be back who I am, listen to some music that I didn't even know happened, and watching shows, and just trying to become a person again. So that's what I'm working on.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And you're in the perfect location to do so. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. We need to just pass you with this. Pass that
You
question.
can come. I wish you guys could come.
I was there in February for Carnival. So
Oh, nice.
right before everything went to hell.
Shut down. Well, yeah.
You made it just in time. We had a trip.
For my costume. So I was already on to something. I already knew something was up.
Yeah. It's funny, when I went to Crop Over last year, I wore a face mask as well. And we had the trip planned with Black women PhDs to go out to Crop Over this year, and cannot do it with everything happening with COVID-19. So when those borders open back up, just note that we'll have to get a section and go out there and put mask in the costume. Oh goodness, but yes, you are in the perfect location, Josanne. So thank you for sharing that. Ashley, do you want to share?
Yeah, sure. 5 weeks ago, I made a transition to working as executive director of a new organization. So I'm still in transition there. It's very research heavy. The founder is a clinical psychologist and majority of the board members are clinical psychologists. So still trying to just keep up the discipline of researching and reading and keeping up with current literature. And then my dissertation was on how hope is impacted through the experience of foster care. And so I've been working in the space with foster children for almost the last 12, 13 years. So I'm kind of getting back into really working in that space. I have a strong partnership with the Department of Human Services here through another project that I do. So I've started to write just a series of journals or just a series of articles for foster parents on how to increase hopefulness in their foster children. So kind of moving into that space of maybe doing some trainings and providing some educational resources to foster parents and child welfare workers. So that's it. And then August, I'm going to have a baby and just slow everything down. So be on maternity leave and just sit home and snuggle with the newborn. And maybe still try to do some writing, but we'll see.
Yes, August, baby.
It might be closer to your birthday actually now. So just so you know.
Well, take that break. The writing can definitely happen at a later date, but take that break and enjoy the time with your baby. Dr. Hill?
So my goal was to finish my degree before I sought after a cabinet level position, but that actually took place in November, so I reached that goal. And so I have a lot of people asking me what's next, and like a lot of you, I'm just trying to figure out who I am now that I have this PhD. What does that mean? What kind of responsibility does that mean to me right now? Even to the point, as you said, we wanted to still be called by our first names. Just still trying to get used to people calling me Dr. here, and I'm like, no, I'm just Gina. You know, I'm the same person. But I understand people want to honor the work that I've done. Also, I'm a preacher, but I put that on pause for the past couple of years because I was getting this degree and it took up so much time. So I'm looking forward to getting back to preaching more and doing more, being more active in my my church ministry. And then I may have another baby. I don't know. That is still kind of up in the air. I look at y'all faces. I made my husband wait 5 years. So now we're in conversation of, do we want to have another child, or we like the freedom that we have right now and not the bill of daycare and childcare. So we're having to make some decisions over the next couple of months. If it don't happen this year, then it ain't happening.
That daycare bill.
Yes. That's a mortgage.
Private school.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So navigating the personal and the professional as well.
Yeah.
And Stefan?
I'm trying to get like y'all. Like I'm just trying to get there. That's it. You ask me in a couple weeks. I don't know if my brain will still work. It's at like 40% right now. But I imagine I will be trying to figure out who I am outside of this. Like, it's been a minute. I don't know. I don't know what life is gonna look like. I don't know what I'm gonna look like. but I look forward to it.
What's one thing you at least hope for or that you want to get back to?
I think I want to read for fun. Like, what is that?
Yes. Okay.
Right, on purpose. But yeah, things that aren't necessarily academic.
Okay. And Crystal, did you go? Okay, all right. And we have Corey next.
If you would have asked me this 6 months ago, I'd have been like, girl, I'm just trying to get a PhD, leave me alone. But starting in like January, filling out like postdoc positions, what I really wanted to do. I know I was interested in like science policy, so I was looking for jobs, NIH, FDA. And then out of nowhere, my PI referred me to my now new PI. And he was like, you know, just talk to her, see what the research is about. And then I was like, well, y'all, looks like I'm going to Michigan. So now I'm going to be a postdoc research fellow in a Black woman's lab. And so that's something that I was really inspired by and also wanted to continue. Although I appreciate my PI, my past PI, it's just nice to finally have somebody, you know, in a leadership role in academia that I can look up to. So now that's currently what I'm doing. And then, so for 2 years, I'm like, y'all can stop asking me. This is what I'm gonna do. After that, I'll figure it out, maybe more in the science policy realm. But currently, I'm looking forward to my new position as a postdoc in her lab, doing more chemical engineering type of research.
Okay, all right. So thank you all for this amazing conversation this evening. So much energy, and you all have so much to look forward to. I know this is definitely a critical moment in your journey. I just want to welcome you all to being doctors, right? I'm so glad that you're joining this club. And note, this is something that was told to me. I was presenting at a conference and I said, you know, I'm still trying to navigate this. This was back when I had just finished, and there was a Black woman. She had her, she was actually in the position to retire. She was about to retire and she was in academia. And she said, you know what? There's a plethora of Black women that have their doctorates already that are waiting to welcome you to this club. So I just want to share that with you as well, and note that please let me know if you have any questions or how I can support you along the way. Please continue to collaborate, create these spaces for yourself, whether it be on your campus, in your office, in your local community, in the church. Some of you are preachers or a pastor's wife or the grandchild or a daughter of a pastor, right? So wherever it is, make sure you create that space for yourself, really hone in on community, and note that there is a plethora of Black women that are waiting to welcome you to this club. So I just want to say congratulations. And I look forward to seeing all the amazing work that you'll do now. Please refer to yourselves as doctor. When you enter the field, change those signatures, okay? Have folks address you as such because you've worked hard for this. And, you know, there should definitely be some applause as well as recognition for the hard work that you've done. Oftentimes we go overlooked. We don't necessarily get the attention or recognition that we should receive, and it's passed off to someone else. But just note that you matter. Your voices matter, your work matters, and I hope that you continue to push forward in whichever direction you want to go. You have you have the ability to do so. So congratulations again, and thank you for this chat, ladies.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Griffin, for hosting us and just kind of being a part of this. And thank you, Dr. Rivera, for linking up with Dr. Griffin to do this. So, and I know I came at you ladies pretty early, and we finally did it, and we got it done.
Yes.
And just thank you guys. You know, I just had a tiny vision, and you guys kind of just said, yes, I'll be a part of it. And I think our stories are just so important to for people to see, especially now, because we have a lot of young ladies who are trying to get through and just trying to keep their mind right. And not just women, but men as well. And let's be honest, the culture. We got a lot of folks trying to get through this thing. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this tiny little vision for me. And we made it and we did it. And thank you so, so much.
Yes, congratulations. And keep using that vision. Keep walking.